Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to go over how I built this medicine cabinet. I know it's a little different from the things I normally post, but I've just recently renovated my bathroom and a lot of problems came up with this. One of the things being was this was a very unique space I had to fill, and I didn't want to put up just a plain mirror because this is my main bathroom, so I didn't want things like deodorant and toothbrushes and stuff constantly on the sink or a counter. So I decided to build this insert. All of the other ones I was looking for were either way too big or way too small. I thought I'd give it a crack and I'm really happy I did. I really enjoyed this project and I'm absolutely in love with how this turned out. This is how I built it. I hope you enjoy, and if you do, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Like I said, one of the biggest obstacles I had with this bathroom was trying to find something that would not only fit this size, but also fit the depth that I was looking for. This house was built a really long time ago, and it's a very weird depth. It was about 3.5 inches with the drywall. I wasn't too worried about it though, because this wasn't any kind of supporting wall or anything like that. They probably just put it in to frame out how big the bathtub was going to be, so I was actually kind of grateful that they did that. So I decided to take a piece of backer board. It's very thin, very flimsy, but I had tons of it left over because of some leveling things I needed to do with the floor. So if I cut it down to the exact size I needed, that was going to be a great start. But before I did anything else, I needed to make sure I got the proper playlist going on. For this particular project, I'm pretty sure I went with 80s. Can't go wrong. After I did that, I decided to start cutting down the frame of the cabinet. Since it was about 3.5 inches, I needed to make sure the boards were going to be flush with the wall. So all I had to do was just cut 3.5 inches minus an 1/8 inch for the depth of the backer board. It wasn't very hard, and it turned out great in the end. Once I was happy with the depth, it was time to cut the length of the boards. They were roughly 19 inches by 24 inches. All I had to do was really just match the backer board piece that I have. I could cut them down and then just match them up on the back, and everything would fit pretty well, seeing as how I made the backer board cut to the exact size I needed it to be. Once I was happy with that, I decided to check the square of the backer board. You see, a lot of people use some jigs and clamps and stuff like that when they're building boxes. I don't really use them too often myself. As long as your back piece is extremely square, when you match it up to your side pieces, it's gonna square it out. Most boxes are built with very flimsy joints, so doing this will kind of square it up anyway. Now that that was underway, I could get to putting together the frame of the box. This was relatively easy, just kind of glue and screw it. It was pretty fresh wood, but I always use a pilot hole just in case. There's nothing more frustrating than drilling a screw into a piece of wood and having it split on you when you could have just drilled a pilot hole to begin with. I also decided not to go too fancy with the joinery on this. Once I kind of put this together and then inserted it into the space in the bathroom, it was never going to be touched again. It wasn't going to be moved. Unlike the door that was going to be on there, it was pretty much just going to sit there. So I didn't really need to waste any time doing any kind of crazy joints or anything like that. Just a simple glue and screw method was going to be exactly what I needed for this. You could use pocket holes and stuff like that, but you'd be wasting time kind of pulling out your pocket hole jig and all that stuff for something that no one's ever going to see as it is. Once it goes into the space, it's completely unnoticeable, so save yourself a little bit of time and some headaches and just make some simple joints here. But once I was happy with that, I decided to glue up my backer board. This was one thing you do probably want to spend some time on. The last thing you want is a gap to kind of open up in the back. You wouldn't be able to repair it. You'd have to pull the whole thing out, and it would be a pretty big nightmare. So just take a little extra time on this portion and you'll be happy in the end. Remember to load up on your glue and don't be shy with your nails. Get a whole bunch of them in there. Close up as many gaps as possible so that when you insert this into the wall, you know, a small gap doesn't kind of point up. A lot of people won't notice it, but it'll probably drive you crazy. I know it would certainly drive me crazy. But as you can see with the joints that I used, squaring this up wasn't too hard. I literally just kind of pushed it into square with 2 fingers. Once I did that, nailed it all up, and that was pretty much it for that part. I definitely didn't cheap out on the nails on this part. Like I just said, you want to close up all those gaps, and you're never going to see these nails or anything like that. So don't be shy, go ahead and just load it up, close it up as much as possible. It'll be plenty strong with the glue. Whenever I do a glue up like this though, when I have the squeeze out, I don't necessarily wipe out the glue. I do try and squeeze a lot of it back into the gap to make sure I really get amazing coverage. But look at that, I love that. It's so simple, it's so clean, and it's exactly what I'm looking for. Now I'm just gonna quickly go over, test it out, and make sure I got it right. Since I cut the backer board to the exact space that I needed, it wasn't gonna be too hard to figure out that it should have fit. If it doesn't for you and you made it a little bit big, just sand off the edges until it slides in there. If it is a little bit too small, don't worry too much, you can kind of shim that up. But if you got your backer piece the right size, the rest of it should fall in. Now right now I'm just kind of measuring out the frame pieces that I'm going to use. Once I got a good measurement, I believe I went with 2 inches, it was time to pull it out and get to work on the actual trim for the frame. So now, the trim on the front of the frame, or a face plate, was going to be pretty easy to do for this part. It was just going to be 2 inches thick, and I didn't need to adjust for any kind of backer board or anything like I did with the actual frame of the cabinet. I suppose I could have inserted the cabinet and then built the faceplate and just nailed it on after, but I really wanted this to be kind of just like a one-piece build where I could put it in, and if need be in the future, maybe the style didn't really stand up or anything, I could kind of just take it out after. So the one piece was definitely the way better way to go. And this was, in my opinion, actually a little simpler in the end, although it was going to take a little more work to attach the trim onto the frame of the cabinet now. I think it would have been easier to put it in as one complete piece as opposed to putting in the cabinet, building the frame or the faceplate, and then inserting it on after. Probably would have been a little annoying. But one thing I kind of had to make sure I did was I went really light with the nails but still heavy with the glue, because any nail you put into this part you're gonna have to fill and sand off later. Remember, this is going to be the most looked at thing in your entire bathroom. People may come over and check out any kind of renovation or work or anything you've done, but after all of that, they're constantly going to be looking in the mirror, especially you too. So try not to use too many nails, use more glue for this, because the least amount of nails just means less holes to fill and less sanding. You're still gonna have a decent amount, but you know, just make it a little bit nicer and a little bit easier on yourself. One thing you're gonna definitely want to keep up with though is gluing those corner miters. Being in a bathroom, some of the wood may kind of move, some of the wood may kind of warp and stuff like that. It probably won't too much, but those miter edges might become unaligned over time with the moisture in the bathroom. So one nice little thing I thought was a good idea to go through was to kind of nail those together. But before I did that, I kind of clamped them up. Doing this kind of flattened the miter. They were pretty close as it was, but this was going to be a nice little bonus so that any moisture that might kind of come around, it won't shift those mitered edges, and you'll end up with a flat faceplate pretty much the entire life of the cabinet. As you can see, I just kind of clamped them flat, got a lot of glue in there, and just kind of got a nail in the corner. No one's going to see this nail, even though we're going to be filling them later, but it's on the edge, so you kind of just want to make sure it gets nice and flat, and it's going to stay nice and flat throughout its life. Once I got those done, it was time to get the other pieces up there. There's a lot of different ways to kind of cut a miter or measure a miter edge. For this one, it was actually a lot easier to just kind of pop the piece in and then just kind of mark it off and then kind of glue and nail it in after. Except for this last piece coming up. Instead of kind of throwing a mitered edge on the side and then trying to guess where it is or measuring it with a measuring tape. What I like to do is I like to lay it on top of both mitered edges. That's going to give me a nice flat mark to kind of make my measurement for, because if you kind of have the one mitered edge on its flat and then the other piece tilted up to make the mark, it's not going to be quite right. Doing it this way, you lose a little bit of wood, but it really does come out pretty nice in the end. It's going to be a lot easier to measure. As you're about to see, it kind of came out pretty nice. A little thing I like to do is I do overcut my mitered edges a touch, and then if I kind of got it right, that's awesome. If not, then I can kind of creep up on the cut. Most of you probably know what I mean. It's really hard to get a mitered cut for a box as it is, so creeping up on it is a lot easier than you know, kind of just trying to measure it right off the bat. But this one, laying it on top and measuring it, kind of came out perfect. This was the first shot, nailed it right off the bat, and it came out really nice. If you have a little bit overlap or whatever, we're going to be sanding this quite a bit to get a really nice smooth edge, so don't worry, you're probably going to sand off anything that's not quite lined up, and then it'll look great in the end. Just remember, don't go too many nails. And in the end, look at that. That's a beautiful little frame. And here's where we kind of make sure we get as many of those nails covered up, as many of those cracks, as many of those kind of mitered edges that didn't perfectly line up. As you can see, I'm pretty good at this, and even I don't get it 100% perfect all the time, so don't stress yourself if you decide to try something like this and it's not absolutely perfect. Now that we have our box fully built, we're just waiting for that filler to dry. It's time to start working on the actual mirror and door for the medicine cabinet. This was pretty much like building almost like a picture frame, except we're going to be inserting a mirror and not a picture on this. I decided to go with 2-inch borders on this as well. I found that it really worked really well together, having two kind of similar pieces, and when it all kind of came together, I was really happy. It looked great. What I'm doing here is I'm kind of just measuring in the middle at 1 inch to see where the door was going to kind of lay on top. However, don't stress yourself if you don't get it bang on. Just build your door, get as close to the overlap as you can for how you're planning on this sitting. But if it's not 100% perfect, it doesn't matter. When you put your hinges in and everything, you can kind of adjust for that little bit off. Maybe it's going to be 3/4 sitting, or maybe it's going to be 1/4 inch sitting on top. There's not going to be any weight really sitting on it or anything like that, so don't stress yourself too much. Just kind of come up with kind of slightly what you're looking for, and then put it all together. But to build this frame, you've seen me use biscuit joiners and stuff like that. However, I've really come to love this little dowel jig I got. I got it on like Amazon or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But this thing is so easy to use. It's actually way easier than a biscuit joiner. You just mark a line on your corner where you're gonna match up your dowel jig here, and it comes with this bit to drill the holes. And the hole is a very standard dowel size. You get tons of them at pretty much any box store. So once you got that, just kind of load it up with glue, get the appropriate dowel size that you got for the particular bit you're using, and pretty much match them up. You are definitely going to want to use a lot of glue here because, like I've said before, these are very small kind of corners to fill, so glue them up lots as you can. But look at that. Such a simple jig, and it comes out with such a precise mitered corner. I'm really happy with it. Now that that part's all glued up, I decided to use a backer board for the mirror part as well. Like I said, I had tons of it left over, and I figured it was going to be a lot easier to adhere the mirror to the frame rather than kind of cutting in a slot into the frame. However, in hindsight, it probably would have been a little bit better, but this was extremely sturdy as it was. So once I got the measurements found out, I called just a general glass place that's close to me and ordered the mirror. And while I was waiting for that to be made, it only took a couple days, I decided to give the box its sanding. And I really gave it a good sanding down. Went through all the grits. I wanted to make sure this was nice and smooth. Remember, this is not only a visual focal point. You're going to be grabbing it, you're going to be touching it. Pretty much anybody that comes over is going to be opening it and looking at it. We know you all do it. So I really wanted to make sure that the smoothness of the cabinet was there. I was going to paint it after and put a finisher on it, so I'm not too worried about that, but that stuff really helps when you have a very smooth sanding to pretty much whatever you're working on. I just did a quick measurement for the shelves that were going to go in there. I decided I was going to make these adjustable. I did have to think of a resale issue in the future, so I cut these down to size and I was going to make a quick jig for how to insert those. But for right now, the mirror came in, so I decided to cut a bit of a inlay for the frame for the door, so that the mirror would sit flush with the frame, and then I could just lay the backer board on top. So I got that all kind of routed out. I was pretty happy with it, but I did need to do a quick test to make sure that it was going to sit flush, so that when I did put the backer board on top, it wasn't going to kind of stick out or protrude too much. And once I realized it was nice and flush, I decided to get some silicone. I asked the lady at the mirror place what is the best way to kind of adhere this, and she said they use silicone. I was pretty happy with that. I mean, they do this all day, every day, so they're obviously going to know what's the best way to use it. So I got some clear silicone. I didn't know if it was going to show up through the mirror. I didn't think so, but I thought I'd play it safe. So I got some clear silicone and really just kind of loaded it up on there. Once I got enough silicone for my liking, I decided to get a whole bunch of glue for the edge so that the mirror would adhere to the backer board, but if that wasn't going to quite cut it, then the glue was definitely going to hold the backer board to the wood, and the wood was going to press the mirror into the inlay, so it wasn't going to go anywhere. So this really had a lot of layers of protection, and that mirror I was pretty sure wasn't going anywhere. Also, at the time that I'm making this video, it's been in there for quite some time now, and it hasn't moved, hasn't budged. Everything is great. Everything's still 100% from the day that I inserted it. So I'm really happy with this design method. And as you can see, it came out looking absolutely great, absolutely flawless. I'm really happy. But I'm gonna install the shelves. And I picked up these shelf pins. I can't remember from where, but just a big box store, but they're great. They're super easy to install. They're adjustable, but they lay flat, and they kind of matched the decor of what I was trying to build as well. So I was really happy with that. But to install them, I needed something, because if I just made marks and just kind of free-handed the drill, I definitely would have made these things unlevel, and that would have been annoying to do all that work and suddenly nothing really lines up. Things are rolling around there and everything. So I made this kind of one-time use jig, very simple. I just kind of set these holes at about 3 inches apart, which gave me a whole bunch of levels to be able to install the shelf pins, so that maybe down the road, if I sell the house, then whoever decides to use it, maybe they have taller items or other kind of items that they wanted to put in there, this was going to make this completely adjustable, and it was also going to give a level of professionalism to this cabinet. Since I had to buy everything else that I installed in the bathroom, this is going to look like I actually bought this instead of built it myself, which kind of, I know it's a weird thing, but it really did match everything that ended up being in the bathroom, but also came through as a nice little personal touch, especially being a focal point. And I just kind of put a piece of tape there to make sure I didn't drill too far down. However, since that was going to go into the wall, I realized later it wasn't a big deal if it went too far through, because it's going to just be up against the wall. You would never see it anyway. I made a quick mark to make sure the jig kind of got aligned up into the other side. it would suck to go through all this work for this jig, only to kind of put it in the wrong way, and then none of the shelf pins would have lined up. So quick mark, made sure I adjusted it so that the other side and everything was going to line up perfectly. And again, you can just make a marker with some tape to make sure that the shelf pin goes in deep enough but not too deep. And in the end, it's gonna come out great. Everything lined up perfectly. The pins were super easy to use. I did want to make sure I got any kind of dust or anything out of those. The last thing I want to do is have these pins kind of jam in any sawdust in there, and then they weren't going to stick in deep enough. So just a quick vacuuming and get those in. And I just want to do a quick test. My table and my ground is pretty level, so I could kind of just mount it up like this quickly and just to kind of pop in these shelves. But I only have 2 shelves. Obviously, you don't really need too many more than that in there, but they are completely adjustable. And now that I checked it out, these shelves fit perfectly. They're just big enough that they don't shake around too much, and everything was level. Absolutely amazing. I'm in love with how that turned out. So happy. I set the door aside so that it would all dry and let the silicone set and everything like that. I wanted to make sure that nothing could really move around in there, so I kind of just left it off to the side while I built that jig. And then once I was happy with that, I came back and gave it a pretty clean sanding so it would be as smooth as the rest of the cabinet. And then once I kind of softened up the edges as well, I decided it was time to drill out the holes for the hinges. And I use this little Craig jig. I'm not sure if I've used this in my other videos or not. If you want to insert a certain type of hinge, this thing is really handy. It takes all of the guesswork out of it. It wasn't really that expensive. If you're going to drill more than a few drawers, especially using these types of hinges, I suggest you maybe just pick one up. You don't need to, but it comes with the bit and everything you need. Not only did it come with the proper bit, it also kind of comes with all the spots that you can drill in pilot holes for how the actual hinge gets drilled into the door. So it really does take all of the guesswork out for you. I have used this on a couple of other projects. Again, I can't remember if I've filmed these ones or not, and I haven't had any issues with it yet, so I'm pretty happy with it. I just wish it did come with a vacuum attachment to kind of clear all that out as I was doing it, but in the end, these come out absolutely great. And once I kind of put them in, it was time to give it all kind of just like a dry run to make sure that everything fits, everything closes the way it's supposed to, nothing sticks when I open it, and just kind of make sure it all works the way it's supposed to. And so far, absolutely amazing. Everything lines up, it looks good. Like I said, you don't have to worry too much if your drawer doesn't kind of line up as you're building it, because it will make adjustments and line up after. But I stood it up, it opened, it closed. It was pretty much everything I'd really hoped for, and I'm absolutely in love with how it turned out. Just one more thing to do before it was time to paint. I just needed to drill a hole for the handle. I figured having all my drills, all my holes, everything all done before I painted, it would make it a lot easier after, so I could just kind of insert it and then insert all the hardware. I did have kind of like this little handle sitting around, and I was really hoping to use eventually, and then when this project came along, I definitely pulled it out. I really like it. It does match everything that I do and have in my bathroom. Now that that's all been taken care of, the only thing left to do is to paint. And you've all heard the saying, watching paint dry, it really is the most boring thing in the world. But painting this was kind of annoying but fun at the same time. As you can tell, I'm not using a primer of any kind. I did hope that I could get a little bit of the grain pattern to show up. I had to tape off the glass part, the mirror, but I didn't use a primer on any of these parts, because although pine doesn't really have a very nice grain pattern, which is why a lot of people use it to build stuff that's just going to get painted in the end, I was hoping to get just kind of some sort of texture out of it. That's why I stayed away from using a primer. I did, however, take a piece of the vanity that I had to cut away for the plumbing to Home Depot, and they've got a color matching sensor there, and I've used it a couple times. I'm actually really impressed by it. It's usually gotten the paint pretty bang on, and if there is a difference to the paint that I'm looking for, I don't notice it. Like with my eye, and I'm looking at the stuff pretty closely, but with my eye, I usually can't notice a difference. So I did try to match this paint to the vanity that I had already had in there. And although I didn't take a picture of the vanity for this project because I concentrated more on the cabinet, it did get it. It looks like it's pretty much just black, but I did do the color match just in case. I didn't want to take any chances, especially on such an important finishing touch. People are going to be looking at the painting, and again, they're going to be touching it. They're going to be just really examining it. But this cabinet was by far the most difficult part to paint. You really wanted to make sure you got it in every kind of nook and cranny. You didn't have to worry about the insert part, obviously, because that's just going inside the wall, but you did have to make sure that the frame and the faceplate did absolutely get as close to a perfect finish as possible. It's pretty much the first thing you see when you open the door. Even before you see the door in the mirror, you're going to see the side of it. And with the faceplate attached, it was a lot more harder to line up than just putting it in without it, but I eventually got it. A couple of little lineup issues, but boom, just went in like an absolute glove. And since I was the one that kind of built the wall or built the insert, I knew it was going to be all level, but just a quick check and it was absolutely bang on. So just needed to make sure I adhered it to the wall. I just kind of used the top jig holes that I had drilled out for the shelves. I was never going to use the top or the bottom one. However, inserting this door isn't exactly the most exciting thing. Since my bathroom's so small, I wasn't exactly able to get a camera on the other side of it. So I just kind of popped it up. There was nothing really to watch there. And yeah, the absolute last thing was getting the handle put in and making sure that kind of all lined up. And just like that, it's done. And like I said, I absolutely love this. I'm so happy with how it turned out. There's really no other way aside from, you know, just maybe putting the mirror in the middle of the frame instead of having a backer board, but the end was absolutely great. The shelves are perfect. They're adjustable. The frame looks good. It all slid in. I didn't take a very good picture of the vanity, but it definitely matched. It's an absolutely beautiful focal point. I really wanted to say thanks for watching my videos. It's been a while since I posted one up, and a lot of you have actually continued to make comments on some of my other videos and stuff like that. So I'm really happy that you guys stuck with me through this, and I promise I have a lot more really interesting videos coming through, all different kinds, furniture, epoxy, and keep those comments coming in. The positivity has been amazing. Thanks a lot, guys, and I hope I see you again soon.